Okay, so we got a whole list of things to do today. The whole premise for going to Texas to pick up those parts was that I got them cheap. I didn't show what I picked up. I didn't show any of the videos from Texas, and wow, somebody straightened up this toolbox. That's nice. Thing one, it's right here. This is the what I call the accelerator, but this is the auger that goes across the top. I'll show you right now on this baler. This auger right here. There's wear on it, believe it or not. There's actually more wear on it than what I had expected when I bought it. But Teresa had a bit of a, not a collision, but she got into some mud, and I don't know if you remember in some of the other videos, it bent this header back, and we did fix it. So it's no big deal. Why isn't that thing turning? Well, I could turn it. Anyways, when that bent, it started colliding with this piece here, and come on, bitch. Anyway, it doesn't want to turn too easy. So, anyway, it should turn easier than that, I guess, if I had two hands on it. But there is some bent up flighting. I did straighten some of it out. And the other issue that the other part that I got, the one that I really wanted, was this right here. This is a power takeoff shaft for this baler. These power takeoff shafts from Krone are about $5,000. Now, they are just a Bendioli shaft. Here's the part number. You can look it up, what it is. It's right there. This is a power takeoff shaft that does not have the overrunning clutch, because this baler has the hydraulic startup. This little motor here is the hydraulic startup for the entire baler. So what you do is you release the pressure off the back, you kick this thing on, it runs it up to 300 RPM. When it reaches 300 RPM, then you engage the power takeoff shaft, disengage your hydraulics, and you're good to go. But in order to do that, this shaft here, the input shaft, it turns. And it turns to the point where it needs this guy here, which is your overrunning clutch. That just allows it to slip, you know, click, 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 click. There's dogs in there with catches that keep it from spinning the power takeoff shaft to the tractor. Because power takeoff shafts, the shaft from the tractor, those shafts, they have brakes on them, the power takeoff shaft in the tractor. There's a brake in there. Now, if you start that thing up, it will wear the brake out on the tractor, so that's why they put that on. Well, I've got several of these overrunning clutches left over from several other power takeoff shafts that I've had over the years, because I don't know, these things, I'm not happy with them, and I will show you what I'm going to do to prevent some of this damage that we're getting. But there's the overrunning clutch that I'm going to take off of this power takeoff shaft, and I'm going to take the yoke off of that one and replace it with that. It's the same universal joint. I just have to be very careful so that I don't lose any of the needle bearings. Yeah, needle bearings, what a pain in the ass. This shaft has very little life left into it, and I'll tell you why, or show you why. But if you look closely here, there's a wire tie, and inside that wire tie is tape, electrical tape. You can see it here that we put it there all the way around it. When Bendioli builds these things with this is a reservoir for grease, okay? So as you make a corner, this thing comes around, dips into the grease, and lubricates the constant velocity shaft. Okay, the plate, there's a constant velocity, or the CV joint. It's basically just a steel plate that slides between two pieces of steel that dips into grease, and the grease lubricates the steel so that it doesn't wear out. Now, when that starts to wear out, or when that runs out of grease, that generates a lot of heat. And then the ball, and I'll show you the ball, will start to wear. That little ball right there, that'll wear in the socket to the plate. And there's one on this side as well. And then you start to get some play. And I don't think you can hear it, but there's a little bit of play in there. And that plate will wear thinner, and then there will become slap, and then it'll start to spin out of balance. It'll start to wobble, and we don't like wobble in our shafts. So if you see where that wire tie is, there is a hole that they have drilled. Well, let me get onto it. There's a hole that is drilled from inside this slot. Okay, so they drill that hole. So when you pump grease into here, it greases this slot where there is a plastic bearing, which, and this is the new shaft. And I will show you all of this when I'm doing this. This might be a two-part series on how to stop this from happening. There's a little plastic bushing in here, and they want you to grease it. The problem is, well, they want grease from that reservoir. Why would they put grease from that reservoir in there? Well, I'm going to tell you. There is a place to grease this plastic bearing and this plastic bearing, but they left out this plastic bearing. Like, yeah, we don't want to have that plastic bearing greasable from an outside source. We want it to come from the reservoir. So as that thing's spinning, it's creating a centrifugal force, which is then causing that grease to go to the outside and out that little port into the plastic bearing. That plastic bearing really does not need to be greased at all. It doesn't. You know why it doesn't? Because it won't ever wear. It wears into position and it will stay just fine without those issues, without that grease in there. So what happens then is the grease runs out of there too fast. It loads this whole entire boot with grease. This whole shield is loaded with grease inside. So when you go to take it off, you're just covered in grease. It's just a disaster. And when you run out of grease in that reservoir, say after 6, 7, possibly 8 hours, depending on how many turns you make, this gets dry and tacky from the grease that was in there. Then it grabs and tears the whole thing off. It will grab here. It will strip off the gizmo that holds it in place, and it will just completely make a disastrous mess of that whole entire thing. And then once that little plastic bushing is out of there, and I'll show you the whole thing, once that plastic bushing is out of there and gone, then the grease just, you put the grease in and it flows out. You make a corner and that plate goes into the reservoir, it squirts grease out the reservoir, and then you lose grease even faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap that little hole. It takes a 5/16 inch, I think it's a 5/16. Yeah, 5/16 inch worm screw or set screw, and you just Loctite that little sucker in there so that the grease can't come out. And you're better off letting that poly bushing run dry and wear completely out over the course of several thousand bales, like 20 or 30,000 bales, rather than in. Okay, so first things first, you have to separate the power takeoff shaft. So let me get you in the right angle. I don't know if you see me. Can you see me? Can you see me now? Anyway, gotta separate this. It's pretty simple. These shields do not slide within one another. This here, let me turn it. This little guy here is actually what locks in here. So when you go to put it back together again, it's pretty simple. You can just take this guy here, pop these out. They're not captive, but they don't go very far. You can pop this out, right? See these slots? They go into here, which go into here. So when you go to put this thing back together again, you can actually twist this like that now and get it into the right size. Put this thing on just the same way we tore it apart. Go ahead and put it back together again that way. Oops. Without losing your screws, because that would get somewhat expensive. So you just kind of, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to go ahead and line them in. So just put that aside because you're going to need it. Slide that apart. This is the 4-lobe one. I am not a fan of these. I like the 21 spline. So what I'll do is we'll put that one aside for right now. Okay? And when you come over here and you take these out. These little screws here are what pretty much hold the shield on to the plastic bearing. And I'm pretty sure There's only 3 of them here, and that should do that. Okay, and then that should just come right out. Take that guy like that. Take this guy here, and pop this off. Set these things aside out of the way. This is a greasy job. So there's grease on these. Whoever had it, you know, when it was brand new, I guess Bendioli did it. They only put the cheapest grease they can put in there, and you know, because that's just the way it is. All right, so then you come over here and you've got your little bit, your bearing or your bushing. Take that. Take note that that little nipple faces to the back. There you go. Going to set that aside as well. It will go back together exactly the same way it came apart. Very easily. If you take your time, you should be okay. So that's that. Now what I have to do here is actually I will show you. Give me a second. I'm a little bit dumbfounded here because it's looking to me as though this is a different size shaft. Right. I'll come back to it. I kind of pride myself on honesty, and just looking at the shaft, it looks a little different, and it is. And the problem with it being different is that I cannot put the overrunning clutch on this shaft. The yokes are different size. That's what I noticed first. I'm like, man, this yoke looks a little, I don't know if you can see it. The yoke here, or the cross, is smaller. And I'll walk over to the shaft that I have over here that I was going to replace it with. Not that one. That's a heavy, super heavy duty one. Look at this, and it's much larger. That is a much larger yoke in there. And then I'm looking at that shaft. I'm like, man, I reached around and looked at it. It's about 1/4 of an inch longer, or wide, 1/4 of an inch larger. So it won't work. Oh, this just gets better all the time. So they represented this thing as for a 1290 HDP. So let's do a little bit of research here. I'm gonna go ahead and 91. I have my book right here. So we're going to look it up in the book. I'm pretty sure the PTO shaft will be right at the front. And the Chrome books really are terrible. I don't know if you've ever dealt with one, but they're terrible. So, yeah, I'll look for this shaft. Give me a second to find it. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got a power takeoff shaft that was misrepresented. This is a lighter duty power takeoff shaft. It is for the 3x3, what do they call that? The 870 Krone Big Pack 870, or the multi-pack. Yeah, well, that kind of annoys me. Well, it's not unusable. Let's put it this way. It is not an unusable power takeoff shaft. It just isn't the proper power takeoff shaft. So what do you do when you have the not proper power takeoff shaft? Well, I'm not going to call the guy up in Texas and say, hey, you asshole, you screwed me out of a bunch of time and a bunch of money for something that was misrepresented. Because quite honestly, it would end up exactly the same. You bought it on auction, you didn't check it 100%, so you fucked yourself. Okay, well, all right. Annoyed at best. Okay, so I pretty much figured what I'm going to do with it in the last 2 seconds. This thing here, I will continue to show what I'm going to do to stop that reservoir. Wow. This is annoying. To stop up that reservoir from leaking out. This shaft can be used, but it cannot be used as a main shaft. This shaft will be put on the truck, in the tool truck, as a spare in case something goes catastrophic. I will be able to just go ahead and put this shaft on the baler. Isn't going to be perfect. I won't be able to use my hydraulic startup, and it won't last nearly as long because of the smaller universal joints. So it's disappointing, but it's not a complete disaster, because that overrunning clutch is very important on the startup. So it's just going to be harder on the tractor side to get the baler started until I get the new shafts for it. I always felt that this was, even before I may have stated it, but I've always felt that this was only going to be a spare anyway, because it is the lesser. I'll show you. I like the 21 spline ones, because what happens with these 4-lug power takeoff shafts is there's a lot of friction in here over time, heat and friction, and then it starts pushing and pulling on that power takeoff shaft and causing it to prematurely wear. So whatever, it is what it is. I didn't get what was represented. It stated in the auction that it was specifically for a 1290 HDP. The piece that sits over there is definitely for this baler. That brand new is $2,700. So I'm not going to be too upset. I've got a spare that I always felt I was going to have a spare. Disappointed, but not devastated. And I was going to buy from Drivelines of Fresno, California. Anyway, 2 new power takeoff shafts to start the year with, and do exactly what I'm going to do here. So for video purposes, I'm going to show you how these things come apart. Now, these things can be a real puzzle if you're not careful. If you don't know what you're doing, they can be a real puzzle. So, just like that, comes apart, set it aside. Now, in this one, you can see that it's well greased. I mean, they did not skimp on the grease part of that. But, so you have these screws go into this small bushing there, and they are really actually just color coded. So, no big deal. They're color coded. You can set them next to one another. The black ones go into the large one for the large boot. And I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff. And you'll be amazed. You truly will. I was amazed when I realized what was happening. And of course, it took years of this and many different power takeoff shafts going bad over time to understand. Oh fuck! I think it bit my. Anyway, to realize what the hell was going on and the actual horse shit. See how easy that comes apart? Again, here's the boot. Worst comes to worst, if I blow up a shield, I got a shield which is worth 200 bucks. If I can't use this thing here. So, here's the bearing. It goes in there. And you see this bearing? It has a little grease nipple right there. See? That's what you're supposed to grease this thing with. and you give it a couple of shots of cheap grease. Don't use good grease, use cheap grease, because the good grease has a higher viscosity and it will actually cause it to jam up. This is just cheap ass wheel bearing grease that, garbage can, or cheap ass wheel bearing grease that somebody just put in there. Now, here's for your edumacation purposes. This is the part that I'm going to take off, this little guy here. All right, I'm just probably going to take a little picker or something. I have to take this guy right here. I'm hoping you can see this. Yeah, this right here, this plastic bushing. This is, oh yeah, and you can see the difference in this reservoir. This was totally misrepresented. I am not happy about this, but like I said, it was an auction. I guess it's a buyer beware kind of a thing. I did not run the serial or the parts. You know what? I did run that parts number. I absolutely 100% did run that parts number, because yeah, I did. I gotta fit, well, whatever. It ain't gonna matter. I just gotta get over it and just realize that I did not do my due diligence, and it's my fault. So I'm gonna take this thing off of here now. You have to take it, everything comes off the back of the shaft side. Now here's the amazing thing with this. Right there. See that? That's how you grease this thing, manually. But in the boot does not have a cutout for that. So what I'm going to do when I get done with this is I'm going to drill a hole for that, so that I can grease this thing independently of that reservoir. All right, so let me shut you all off here. Yeah, let me shut you all off. I'm going to get the parts that I need to. Yeah, they want to the second phone. Okay, so yeah, not very good video work the last couple of minutes, but I will show you what I've done, and well, actually I'll explain to you what I've done. So this is different than what those shafts over there are. I drilled, you saw me drill that out. I had to make a valley there. It won't make any difference because I filed it. Here's my file. I took and I filed this here so that there's no sharp edges that can catch that plastic piece. And then what I did was I took my tap and die set, and I tapped that out 6 by 32, and I took silicone sealant and I put it on the little screw in there that will seal it and keep it from backing out. It'll actually hold it in place. It will cure perfectly fine in there, and I sealed that up. Then I took the grease gun, and I greased this Zerk here to see how well it worked, and it is good. So I don't know if I showed you, I might not have showed you what I had done, but that little hole there is when this thing makes a turn like that, the grease would shoot out of there. And I shot a lot of grease out of there before I put that thing in there. And now you can see that the grease is going through the ball socket, which is exactly the way it's supposed to go, instead of going out that stupid little hole. So now I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together the way I took it apart, with the exception of, where the hell is that thing? What do I do with it? What do I do with that damn thing? Oh, I had that little bush, that bearing. Well, I'll have to find my bearing and then I'll get on to it. Recording?
Yep.
Okay, so I got my beautiful assistant. What's my assistant's name? Maria Teresa Mangaya, right?
Right.
Maria Teresa. Anyway, so
What is that plastic thing for?
this is the bearing, okay?
Thought you were gonna say condom.
We love you long time.
Shut up.
Anyway, yeah, so I put that on backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that? I did. I put it on backwards. I think that's going to scrape, isn't it?
Why would you do
It
it
is,
on
because I'm
backwards?
stupid sometimes, that's all. Sometimes I'm stupid. It's not that I put that on backwards. I put the little clip on backwards. See, the clip, this little clip, are you going to show this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this clip here, it will hit the metal piece, and we don't really want it to do that. So we got to do it this way. It's got to go backwards, and it doesn't matter. It's easy to put it on either way because there's plenty of room there. But at least, yeah, it's going to be an asshole to me. Okay. It has to go on this way, because if it doesn't, it will wear the little gizmo out, right?
Right.
And it will fall apart inside, possibly. Now all I have to do is get that thing. Yeah, good. Okay, without cutting my hand.
I missed that. That was like a quick snap.
It did. What you can see it here, look. See, now the little teeth, they come up like that. So this comes out. Okay, so what I've done, you see the little cutout that I made?
Yeah, that one.
That little cutout will mean nothing as far as the bearing itself. I don't want this bearing to have any lubrication on it. It will wear into the steel, it will polish the steel, and it will stay fine. What I can do here is, you see that little nipple there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that little nipple, let me do a little more in a second here. Did I put those away? No. So glad I got my assistant. This little nipple, if you see, there is no cutout for that nipple. So what I have to do is I take the bell and I put the bell over it, and I got to figure out where, before I do that. So that bell, I got to cut a hole in this bell so that I could get to that if I want to grease it. I don't want to grease it, so I'm not going to bother.
Okay.
This faces to the reverse, to the back, like that, right? And what gets me here is this piece. How in the hell? Let's get smart here. Okay, so there's the line, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm pretty certain that if we do 1, 2, 3, then we can do these 1, 2, 3. And we can do, this guy here is going to be slightly off. Like to there. Like that. And yes, so to put that all together correctly like that. There it is. And that's it. So that hole will have to be cut right here. Right in between there. I can feel it. So I'll just cut that myself. Hopefully, I'm where I need to be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this guy here. Like so. And hopefully, we're right where we want to be. Take my little drill. And that's how these things go together. Okay. And it should be exactly the way it should be. And I should save on grease. It should save on wear and tear. This whole entire thing. The whole entire thing. Oops. What the hell?
Looks like it's not going.
Yeah, it's there. It's just not wanting to go. Maybe it's this guy. I don't know. Yeah, it's there. One of them has to be stubborn. What is he doing?
Playing with the lights.
And we have the final one, which there. So we're all good. We're all good. Now, for the final step in this, which is to do that. See? Find that hole. And you put your little grease nipple through there, like so. And everything should be perfect.
Should be perfect.
Now, I haven't told my wife yet that this is the wrong power takeoff shaft, so we'll get her reaction.
Oh my God, really?
Really. It was misrepresented on the auction.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Unfortunately, this one is not even in that book for this. It doesn't match up to a 1290 HDP high speed like they said it should. It is for an 870. It is lighter, and it's not set up for the hydraulic starter, which I knew when I picked it up, which was not going to be a problem because I have one. The unfortunate problem is that the one that I have does not have the right size universal joints, and they do not interchange. So I'm kind of screwed there, which annoys me, to say the least. But it will work as a spare in the case that we have a catastrophic failure. And honestly, that's all that I really wanted this one for anyway. If I get this correct, I'll shit a brick. Holy smokes. Okay, so I'm shitting bricks now. Okay. And just like I told everybody earlier, that there's this certain way that
Why
goes
is he
through.
laughing like crazy?
It will?
Yeah.
Because he can.
Silly
Wrong thing. Yeah. So we'll just loosen these guys up. And we will, I think it was this way that it came off. I'm not 100% sure. About 90% sure. There it is. So that little gizmo's back together, and you don't have to fight with both. Instead of fighting with both the shield and the tube, it is now put together. Slides perfectly. I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. Everything is nice and greasable and stiff. I'm sure there's going to be some people that bitch at me for the lack of that nipple right here, though. I know where that nipple is. It's right here. I don't think this needs to be greased. I have run these things for years and years and years, and in my experience, when these things, the grease dries up or gets dirt in the grease, they get real sticky and it pulls the chains off and causes the whole thing to just explode, usually this bell housing. So I will grease this one and I will grease this one, but I'm going to let this one run dry.
Okay.
Just because I can. Eventually that plastic will wear out of there.
Right.
But I don't care. Honestly, what I would really like to do is cut this right here. Cut this bell housing right here. And expose this universal joint here so that we're not fighting for these stupid grease zerks. But because this is a spare, and I really am going to buy 2 new drive shafts from drivelines of Fresno, California, I'm not really too concerned at all with it. Maybe somebody who has an 870 that needs a power takeoff shaft, you know, it's a $5,000 shaft. It's been modified now that it will last twice as long, guaranteed. Guaranteed. And I'm sure there's some engineers out there saying, or armchair engineers that are saying that I just screwed up the whole thing. I'm going to tell you, the reason they do that is so that you buy a new power takeoff shaft. They put that grease so that it squirts the grease out into this. There's no way that that plastic bushing needs more grease than the CV joint needs grease. It's stupid. That's why all the grease is on the rear window and stuff, because of that thing that I just drilled out and plugged up. So anyway, with that being said, thanks for watching. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. If you don't like it, don't comment, don't rate, and don't subscribe. Right?
Right.
Just don't do it! No, it's all good.